What Once Was Mine, Chapter 15, Rapunzel. She bounced up and down while trying to predict time, do math on entirely unknown quantities, wondering if there would happen the extremely rare but occasional occurrence. Rapunzel, I forgot something. How many times had Rapunzel similarly bounced with impatience, waiting and hoping for her mother to come back? But now... How long did it take Gothel to travel deep into the woods that she couldn't see or hear anything? How far was it? How many miles of walking or minutes? As a child, Rapunzel had constantly worried that something would happen and she would need her mother to return for some reason. But Gothel didn't hear Rapunzel yelling. But now, what if she came back? What if she had one last word to say? What if... She weighed her worries on one hand against creeping shadows on the other. The sun was 40 minutes from setting, but the woods closest to the tower were already changing from the deep golden of late afternoon into the hazy blue, whatever you call the time, just before evening. The hole in the hiding tree had gone from brown to black to deep brush and blue. The leaves on the branches above it lost their gloss and grew matte. Finally, Rapunzel could stand it no more. She took her long braid, the one she had never coiled back up again after Gothel had left, and tied the end around the armoire. It clung snugly to itself, and though she tugged it as hard as she could, it didn't give. Rapunzel, having no experience with normal hair beyond Gothel's frizzy locks, wasn't at all surprised at this. Holding the silvery rope around her waist, keeping the slack wrapped around her arm, she leapt up into the window ledge. She balanced easily there, bare toes gripping the stone like a gecko's. Rapunzel had never worn shoes. Once Gothel had given her a pair of dainty pink slippers, which were pretty to wear and fun to prance around and slip along the immaculately waxed floors in, but aside from that she saw little use for the things. Slowly, and perhaps unmindful of how much her hair might have somehow supernaturally eased her work, Rapunzel started down the tall side of the tower. It was a little dizzying at first, but then again, she had 19 years in a tower to grow immune to fear of heights and vertigo. After not falling or slipping for at least a minute or two, she began to bounce. Just a little at first, testing her hair and her fear. Soon she pushed herself off the wall, swinging back and forth. Her long hair spiraled around the tower, while her legs shot out into the air, and her head hung back, like that of a fledgling unsure which way was up. "Whee!" she cried out, forgetting for a moment that Gothel might not be far away yet, or might return. She shut up immediately and concentrated on working her way down again, methodically but quickly. Eventually her toes touched grass. Her plan was to land, run for the tree, root around in its hole, grab whatever was there, and then race back up to her tower before night fell, or 5 minutes passed, or Gothel returned, or the man returned, or those chasing him returned, or Rapunzel immediately killed anyone or anything that might have the ill luck to cross her path. But grass. She wiggled her toes. It was soft, springy, hard edges tickly. Gah! She cried in joy, looking at the little stalks poking up between her footy digits. She jumped up and down. She felt the earth push back. It was so different from stone or wood. Soft but hard, warming quickly under her feet, sticking to her feet. She ran forward just a little bit to see how it felt. It was much nicer than running in the tower. Then she paused, realizing something. She had never run more than 7 Rapunzel lengths in a row, which was the longest stretch of straight floor she had when all the furniture was moved out of the way for the game's day obstacle course. She couldn't run much farther now, with her hair tethered to the armoire back to the tower. But if it hadn't been tethered, she could run forever. "What's that? I've never seen that flower before," she cried, forgetting her train of thought. She bent over the blossom, a tiny little white star-shaped thing no larger than the tip of her pinky. There were a few scattered here and there, but they didn't grow in masses like bluets or brambles, so there was no way she could have seen it from her window. She poked it. Yellow pollen got on her fingertip. Suddenly she grew frightened. What if she killed it? Rapunzel jumped off the ground, her second realization far more frightening and profound than her first. Everything outside was alive. She was standing on living grass, and roofed by living trees. Bugs were flying past her, completely unaware of her deadliness. One landed on her. A bird chirped in the tree, a leaf fell from the sky, the threads of mushrooms wound in under and through the grass and into the heart of the forest, any and all of which could be killed by her without a moment's thought. If she touched a plant and it died, would the bugs on it die? and the fungus intertwined with its roots, and but nothing was dying. Not right then, anyway. Mostly everything was ignoring her. Don't think of the chicken. Don't think of the chicken, she told herself, trying not to think of whatever it was the thought of when she had to kill things. A breeze blew a large bumblebee into her. Smack! Despite her anxiety about harming the thing, she giggled as it shook itself and flew off again, slowly gaining speed as it recovered. It was fuzzy and yellow with enormous eyes and tiny antennae and looked like, if it were less busy, it might have been friends with her for a bit. It had run into one of the thick braids coiling around her shoulders. Even while she was thinking about it, / not thinking about it, / thinking about, / not thinking about killing the chicken. Cautiously, she wrapped a tendril of hair around her finger. She walked up to a tree and poked it. Ow! The tree skin was harder than she expected, never having poked a tree before. She supposed, sucking on her injured finger and its bent-back nail, that was why wood was hard. But the tree endured her hair and even the beginning of her death thoughts, and didn't die. Just like when she was able to stroke the chicken before having to kill it, or how she cared for her houseplants. No one was afflicted by her magical hair without her actively willing it. I just have to not get angry or scared or hurt, she said. I can be careful and cautious. She stood very still, drilling that order into her soul. Then she spun around in joy, arms out to the clean, fresh breeze, inhaling pollen and beauty and possibly one or two small gnats. Whee! Not accidentally killing anything meant so many wonderful things. She would not keep this secret. She would tell her mother. She would tell Gothel all about her trip down to the outside world, and how nothing at all happened. She hadn't killed anyone or anything. She even petted a lizard. Actually, she was doing it right then, before she could stop herself. Even as she was thinking these things, she knew it was a lizard from pictures on the fairy tale book. Long and lithe and dry and scaly, but with legs, unlike a snake. Lizards were turned into fancy footmen in Cinderella. Probably a skink of some kind. The reptile bore her touch with the vacuous patience of a cold-blooded creature that liked to be warm and didn't smell anything dangerous like a fox or a hawk. Its experience with humans was minimal to none. Rapunzel, of course, assumed this not running away meant it was a potential wilderness friend. I'm not going to kill you, she promised the little lizard in herself. You adorable soft-skinned thing, you're perfect. She would tell her mother that she had done and then show her mother the lizard, and then it was only a matter of convincing for her to take her to the floating lights. She wasn't a danger. Isn't that right, Pascal? I'm going to call you Pascal. And with that, she plucked the lizard deftly up and put her on her shoulder. Dizzy, and now petrified, he gripped tightly to her dress and stayed put. With this daring new plan in mind and the floating lights practically in her reach, Rapunzel nearly forgot the reason she had left the tower in the first place. She shook her head at her own silliness and ran over to the tree with the hole and stuck her head in, which only further demonstrated how little she really knew of the natural world, or the world outside her tower. Aha! Her fingertips brushed the smooth surface of well-worn leather, but she couldn't quite get a grip on it. No matter. She undid a smaller coil of her hair that had been carefully wound in the shape of a rune that was supposed to ward off evil. She retied it into the looping slip knot, and it danced around the dark place, pulling hard whenever it hit something likely. Just like fishing, which she had read about. Eventually the loop tightened around something, and she was able to pull it up. Again, none of this seemed strange to Rapunzel, who had only ever known her own hair. A leather satchel, hastily closed and beautifully worn, barely containing whatever was inside it. Now, she would run back to the tower and hoist herself up as quickly as possible, thereby avoiding anyone returning for the bag or accidentally killing anyone, or the extremely awkward scene that would occur should her mother come back early for some reason. Except that her hands were already opening the satchel, even as she was deciding all this. No! Rapunzel slammed the bag shut and yelled at her hands. Come on, guys! Can't you wait 5 minutes? She stomped back over to the tower wall, putting a look of stern disappointment on her face. She carefully, mindfully, wrapped the giant rope of hair around her waist and began the more difficult trip back up. It crossed her mind for the briefest moment that perhaps Gothel didn't know what she was complaining about when she said the climb was hard. Rapunzel and her hair did most of all the work pulling her. She painstakingly and slowly hauled herself along, biting her lip and curling her tongue at the trickier bits, at one point carefully maneuvering around a nest that was tucked into some ivy, and then around a particularly slippery stone of shiny clad glass. None of her 37 books was about geology. When Rapunzel finally tumbled in through the window, she put a protective hand on Pascal so he wouldn't fall to the floor. She leapt to her feet again, and then, unsure why, spun around and looked out the window again. Night was falling for real now. Everything was much darker, cloaked in blues that had not been there just a few minutes ago, when she was put in the green grass and poking the tree. The whole scene looked like a painting framed by the pointy-topped window. Rapunzel felt a strange quietness come over her that she had never experienced before. Something like wonder, but softer. She had been out there. Down there, it was real and visceral and somehow normal when she was in the grass. And now it all looked like a picture. Delicate, magical, removed. She wasn't sure what it all meant. A secret part of her knew and whispered. Change. Like the pause before a thunderstorm, or the hours before her monthly blood began. She shook her head, clearing things from it she didn't understand or want to. All right, she declared. And now, my birthday mystery. She opened the satchel, and honestly, fate couldn't have provided a better prize at the end of a scavenger hunt. She pulled out a beautiful, sparkling crown. Her large eyes grew even larger. Despite the hour and lack of sunlight, its jewels still managed to shimmer and twinkle in a magical, expensive way. Rapunzel might not have had much experience with royal gems or any kind of precious stone, but it was very clear that these were those. The thing was straight out of a fairy tale. What a princess would be wearing when she was turned back from a swan. The giant diamonds were even shaped like swan's eggs. Under each was a round pink ruby, and threading between them was a strand of perfectly round pearls. She turned it over in her hands, tracing the tiny, intricately wound gold wire that held all together. And there, in a small flat patch of smooth metal, was the artist's mark, in a multi-rayed sun symbol. The same one on her bracelet clasp. The same one that she constantly painted and dreamed of, the one that meant life and happiness and energy in the personal vocabulary of Rapunzel's soul. Why? She looked at her new bracelet. Even to an untrained eye, it was obvious that the two pieces of jewelry had not been made by the same person, maybe not even by the same studio. For one crazy moment, she imagined that it was all connected. What if really was some sort of magical 19th birthday mystery scavenger hunt? What if Gothel arranged everything? The man, the crown, the bracelet was a hint. What other explanation was there? And if so, what if she wanted Rapunzel to sneak out? Rapunzel reluctantly brushed the thought aside, feeling both silly and disappointed at the same time. Her mother most definitely did not want her to leave the tower, ever. She had made that abundantly clear. And she was definitely not the sort of person who hired actors for extravagant birthday surprises. Rapunzel carefully unpinned the largest coils of hair, piled on top of her head. Then she put on the crown and turned to look in the mirror. She didn't want to think it. She wasn't that kind of person, but the crown fit her perfectly. The colors of the stones were accented by her own coloring, and the other way around. She looked like a princess. A princess with a lizard on her shoulder. "Oh, Pascal," she cried, ripping the crown off and putting a hand to him. "I'll bet you're starving, or dehydrated. I'm being selfish here. Let's get you taken care of." So the crown went back to the satchel, and the lizard got some leftover chicken, dangled at the end of a stick to make it look alive. And Rapunzel returned to her nighttime routines. She made herself go to sleep at her usual time, despite a head filled with crowns, lizards, mysteries, and boys. And the best birthday ever.